Tonight on Greater Boston, U.S. Attorney from Massachusetts, Rachael Rollins, joins me on the questions that still remain about the Boston Police Department after a longtime cop and union leader pled guilty to child rape this week, plus the latest in the case of the Boston Marathon bomber and Rollins' focus on human trafficking. Then later, the author of Pandemic Inc. joins me on the ways that fraudsters and profiteers worked the system to line their pockets as COVID spread across the nation and the government failures that led to it. Earlier this week, former Boston police officer Patrick Rose pled guilty to raping and sexually assaulting 6 kids over a period of nearly 3 decades and was sentenced to 10 to 13 years in prison. But it's far from case closed, as this has raised a lot of questions about just how far members of the BPD had gone to protect their own over the years. Despite a 1995 criminal complaint against Rose for sexual assault on a 12-year-old and an internal investigation and social services investigation that both determined there was enough evidence to support the accusation, Rose not only returned to duty, but served another 20 years, ultimately moving on to lead the Patrolmen's Union before retiring in 2018. Joined now by the former Suffolk County District Attorney who initiated the prosecution against Rose. She's now obviously the U.S. Attorney from Massachusetts, Rachael Rollins. U.S. Attorney, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.
You know, obviously every sane person is thrilled that Rose is going to jail. But I have to say, the notion that we may now never know who facilitated him staying on the force for 20 years, allowing him to become a serial predator, just gnaws at me. Does that not bother you?
Of course. This is a case, when it was first brought to my attention, that was incredibly troubling. There are 6 victims, as we know right now, and although he has a 10 to 13-year sentence, I believe he's parole eligible after 10. That is really devastating. That's less than 2 years per victim that this individual gets. And, you know, as the former DA, there are some times where we get sentences that we believe help us in the sense that this individual is no longer in the community and will not be harming anyone else. There's a long probationary period afterwards, but it's deeply disturbing to not have answers about how this happened. Now, I will say, Jim, this was over 30 years ago. There are lots of protocols and policies in place under Commissioner Long right now, where we are happy to say that we do not believe something like this could happen today.
But not all of it was 30 years ago. It began 30 years ago or 27 years ago.
It began 30 years ago, correct.
So Mayor Walsh refused to disclose any of the investigatory file. Kim Janey redacted virtually all of it. Should Mayor Wu release all of the file except that which is absolutely necessary to protect the identity of the survivors?
I think we do need to credit Mayor Janey for the fact that there was some transparency there. I leave it to Mayor Wu to make that decision. But Jim, what's important is we have to explain to the community and the public why it is that we don't turn information over. Sometimes there can be very good reasons why a public records request is denied or why we don't give the public access to information. But when we are silent and do nothing, it allows people to have other ideas about what we're doing. Are we involved in that conspiracy somehow? Are we trying to cover things up? And when I say we, I mean myself as a member of law enforcement. So these aren't easy answers, but I do think it's important that we do a post-mortem after we find circumstances where harm was done to make sure that there are policies and procedures in place where it can't happen again.
Quickly, did you read the file that was ultimately redacted and released when you were the DA?
Of course I did.
Do you think that 80% of it needed to be withheld from the public, as Kim Janey did?
I will not answer that question. I will leave that to Mayor Janey's counsel to make that determination. But for me, as the chief law enforcement officer of Suffolk County, where those 6 victims resided, yes, I read every single page unredacted, and I had a lot of questions as well.
Let's go from bad cop to bad cops. First consent decree with a community for police misconduct during the Biden administration was entered into by your bosses and you with the city of Springfield. Can you give us the gist of it here, if you would, U.S. Attorney?
Of course. So what happened was several years ago under my predecessor, U.S. Attorney Lelling, in the Trump administration, there was approval under Attorney General Sessions to open a pattern or practice investigation. And what that does, Jim, is it allows the federal government to start looking civilly into whether there are patterns or practices of unconstitutional or troubling behavior. Sadly, after a very thorough investigation, the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, along with the office I am now privileged to lead, found patterns or practices of violations of Fourth Amendment rights of individuals in Springfield.
Excessive violence by the cops.
Excessive violence, strikes to the head, excessive force allegations that were sustained, some of them. And as a result of that investigation, and this is my predecessor and my civil division here, met with the mayor of Springfield as well as the commissioner of the police department, and came to a resolution whereby there is now a consent decree and there is going to be oversight regarding significant changes that have to happen at that department. I will say, Jim, that it's important to note there are close to 500 sworn officers in the Springfield Police Department. The narcotics unit, which is where the problems were found, is approximately 25 officers. So, a small
percentage. It's not an indictment of the whole force, is your point.
It's not an indictment of the whole force, but there were deep concerns with respect to that narcotics bureau, and there have been changes made already.
So let's move to a happier subject for a brief moment. You were installed, I think you were installed earlier, but the formal installation was last week. Virtually every luminary was there. What stuck out to me is virtually every living former U.S. attorney was there, including, at least by my count, 4 Republicans: Weld, Sullivan, Budd, and Lelling, a couple of whom are very conservative people. Did it occur to you at any moment that 4 of your Republican predecessors honored you with your appointment, yet not one of their fellow Republicans in the Senate thought you were fit to serve as U.S. Attorney?
I definitely was aware of the first part of that sentence. It was an honor and a privilege to have a formal investiture. And I know you're teasing me. It's like my 9-year-old who wants to have 15 birthdays. I promise you, I had to be sworn in before I took office.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the last one. But it was humbling to look and see Governor Weld sitting there, who supported me and was vocal about my qualifications to be U.S. Attorney, as well as my predecessor, U.S. Attorney Lelling, U.S. Attorney Nate Mandel, as well as obviously U.S. Attorney Budd and others, U.S. Attorney Ortiz. So we had close to 10 living United States attorneys in that room, and that's history. And I am deeply honored to call them my colleagues, and I have very big shoes to fill with respect to each of them.
Well, if at any point you do want to talk again about the Republicans in the Senate, you give me a call and we'll be happy to do that. I'm not sure if it was at that investiture or at a different time. You announced this new unit around equity issues. Specifically, what I'm most concerned about is around human trafficking. What will that unit do that was not done by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts before?
This office has always cared deeply about human trafficking, but there hasn't been a designated unit focused exclusively on human trafficking. We have, for example, the head of the gang unit also is the liaison with respect to human trafficking. I want somebody who is going to focus, or individuals that are primarily focused on human trafficking, and that's what we're trying to do. Jim, we've seen a huge uptick in this type of criminal behavior, in particular in vulnerable communities. Like, for example, at the Mass Ave and Melnia Cass intersection, where we see mental health and substance use disorder coming together to a head, we also see, sadly, drug trafficking and human trafficking happening at exorbitant rates in those specific areas. And many of the individuals that human traffic and traffic in drugs also have illegal firearms. So there's a lot of intersectionality, and we want to make sure we get experts that are working and available to the Boston Police, the Mass State Police, as well as all of our law enforcement partners across the Commonwealth.
That's terrific. You know, if we can move to another local issue, the Supreme Court upheld, reinstated, I don't know what the appropriate verb is, the death penalty for Jahar Tsarnaev. And I hope you can reconcile something for me. Joe Biden campaigned for president against the death penalty, yet his Justice Department argued before the Supreme Court of the United States for the reinstatement of the death penalty against Tsarnaev. This is not about whether he deserves the death penalty or not, at least my question is not. Can you reconcile those two things for us, U.S. Attorney?
I can. I believe that there is a moratorium on executions under this administration right now. I would phrase what you are saying differently. I think what the Department of Justice argued was that the jury got it right, that the jury was presented with evidence under a previous administration, and they got it right. And that's what we were arguing for. Whether you or I agree with the death penalty or not isn't relevant to this analysis. We believe Judge O'Toole and that those jurors who worked incredibly hard over weeks and weeks and weeks, if not months, of trial, and then later the death phase of that process, we believe they got it right.
But under Joe Biden, Tsarnaev would never be put to death, or at least unless that moratorium is removed. Is that not correct?
That is in fact correct. And those two things can coexist. For example, Gary Lee Sampson, which is another death penalty case that we had, that was brought under then DA Sullivan and soon to be U.S. Attorney Sullivan, because one of the victims died in Michael Sullivan's jurisdiction in Plymouth County. And then he brought the case federal under the carjacking statute for those 3 victims that Gary Lee Sampson murdered. We argued after Gary Lee Sampson died to against the abatement doctrine, which would have permitted Mr. Sampson to die without the convictions regarding the 3 people he murdered and not sentenced to death.
Because there were still appeals pending. Was that not the notion behind the abatement?
Pending.
So,
and it's very interesting, Jim. It's not consistent, where I fully understand that pre-verdict, if you die, you are innocent until proven guilty. But Gary Lee Sampson has been, not only did he plead to those 3 murders, but or 2 of them in Massachusetts, he was found responsible and put to death by a jury. So what we have is, thankfully those 3 families will never have to deal with Mr. Sampson again, but he died a serial killer who was sentenced to death.
One last thing, Rachael Rollins. One of, I think, the legacies that you deserve a lot of credit for is the creation of this Integrity Review Bureau when you were the DA, which I'm sure viewers, we've had a lot of the men who were freed after decades in prison for crimes they did not commit, thanks to the work of that Integrity Review Bureau. Near the end of your tenure, Stephen Pina was also looked at by that bureau, 28 years in prison, ultimately released by a judge when it turned out that prosecutors had withheld evidence pointing to another killer, buried compromising evidence around key witnesses. The judge himself said, quote, there was a fairly high likelihood that a new trial would be granted by him. I asked your successor, Kevin Hayden, if he would join the defense in the motion for seeking a new trial for Mr. Pina, and here's a little piece of what he had to say.
We'll support whatever the judge finds in this matter. Any impropriety or improper conduct by either the police or the district attorney's office that took place in this case simply can't stand.
So he'll leave it to the judge. He will not join in the motion for a new trial. Are you disappointed by that? Would you have in the past and other similar cases? Were you disappointed by that?
I'm not disappointed by anything that's happening in the Suffolk County DA's office. No matter who's leading an office, they have the ability to make their own decisions. And
would you have made the same decision?
So I would have looked at the evidence, and I did make a decision about Mr. Pina.
Would you have joined in the motion for a new trial?
Well, I believe, Jim, that we did file something with respect to Mr. Pena saying that we supported and were concerned about some of the unconstitutional behaviors that we saw. I will say to you further, I had the privilege of meeting Thomas Coons today, actually, who was just released, the Marine that had been offered a very small sentence if he pled. And although that did not happen inside of Suffolk County, I wrote a letter as DA. Listen, you can firmly support law enforcement and be the chief law enforcement officer while also condemning unconstitutional behavior. And that's something that I did and was proud to do. And every time I did it, I made sure that I called Commissioner Gross or Commissioner Long, as well as the family members of the individual that lost their lives. Oftentimes, these are murder cases where there are victims or survivors that are left, not just the defendants that believe they were wrongfully convicted, but the family members of the murder victims that are left feeling as if they've been lied to because they were told somebody was responsible for that murder. So these are complicated issues. I'm never going to second guess or question what DA Hayden is doing. I just will tell you that I spent an inordinate amount of time myself reviewing these matters. And when I saw behavior that I was not proud of, that I would not put my name on, I had no problem assenting to motions with defendants or opposing them if I thought it was appropriate. And I'm hopeful that DA Hayden will do the same.
Rachael Rollins, good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Always a pleasure.
The spring of 2020 was a time of a lot of uncertainty and, for many, fear. We were just learning about COVID-19, figuring out how it spread, and watching people die alone in quarantine, with hospitals quickly filling up and officials warning about shortages of everything from masks to gowns to beds to ventilators. And while plenty of people selflessly banded together, organizing nightly applause for first responders, painting signs thanking them, collecting materials and making cloth masks as quickly as they could, others saw dollar signs amid all the suffering, with the federal government thoroughly unprepared to address this type of crisis. As a result, a slew of scammers managed to get hundreds of millions of dollars worth of government contracts for goods and services that they never delivered and had no business even pretending they could get in the first place, driving up prices for everyone in the process. The whole sordid, cautionary tale is told in the new book, Pandemic Inc., Chasing the Capitalists and Thieves Who Got Rich While We Got Sick. The author is ProPublica reporter J. David McSwane, who joins me now. David, terrific book. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So is it fair to say the government was so desperate that if let me be euphemistic, if a bold entrepreneur said, I can get you 1 million masks, he or she had a pretty decent shot of getting a multi-million-dollar contract?
Absolutely, that's what happened. I chronicle in the book, one of the main characters, he got his deal simply sending an email and said, I can get you 6 million N95s, and a contract officer at the Department for Veterans Affairs, which oversees the largest hospital network in the country, said, the guy seems legit, and he got a contract.
Well, is that, by the way, if I wanted to create a company to scam the federal government out of millions of dollars, I would name it Federal Government Experts. That's the name, that's the guy's company you're talking about, Robert Stewart Jr., right? And is that right?
That's right.
And we meet you on his private plane. Could you briefly tell the tale of Mr. Stewart there?
Sure. So in those early, really scary months, I decided to take a look at the contracts and the outflows of hundreds of millions, eventually billions of dollars coming out of DC here. And his deal was sizable, $34.5 million with the VA. And I simply called and said, hey, how do you have these masks that no one seems to be able to get? He says, well, I'm the real deal, and I'm hopping on a private jet in the morning to oversee their delivery. And I asked to tag along, and a few hours later, I'm on this private jet, and literally as we're taking off, he divulges that he didn't actually have any masks, says they'd been bought out from under him, and we're sort of on a quest now for the next 36 hours or so for masks, and it leads me into this whole underbelly, this world of mask brokers and traders and secret investors.
And it sort of begs the question why he was dumb enough to allow you on the plane after he knew he wasn't going to produce the masks to the reporter. So he doesn't get his $35 million, if I remember correctly. He does get some PPP money later. But there's another company with another great name that did get $10 million. That's called Filikit. I mean, these names are unbelievable. What did they deliver or not for their $10 million, David?
It's funny you mentioned the name because that's why I first took notice of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this company formed in I think it was in April 2020 or early May. 6 days later, gets a $10 million contract with the Federal Emergency Management Agency for coronavirus test kits. And these are the PCR tests that need lab work and some science is involved. And, was immediately skeptical that they could deliver. The owner of this company, turns out, had a history of fraud allegations against him. I ended up visiting the warehouse outside of Houston and can see that workers are using literal snow shovels to gather up these mini plastic soda bottles that, it's unsterile. They're completely unusable. We hear from public health officials that set back testing in all 50 states.
Why did he get the $10 million? They were literally little tiny soda bottles. Why did they pay him the $10 million if it was all BS?
Well, someone at FEMA didn't check these things out. It wouldn't have taken much to tell that these are not going to work, but because the federal government accepted them and remitted payment, contract experts I talked to said it's hard to make a case to go after the company.
I am almost always willing to blame anything on the ineptitude and corruption of the Trump administration. But when I'm reading your book, I say to myself, had it not been for the fact that his predecessors had starved the public health infrastructure, namely the National Strategic Stockpile, the government wouldn't have been in this position where they had to be doing an Oprah, you get a contract, you get a contract, you get a contract. Is that not a fair analysis of what Trump was given?
Yeah, you're right. It is a bit nuanced. The Obama administration gave the Trump administration a playbook for handling a pandemic. The Trump administration threw it out the window. So it's really impossible to disentangle our sort of short-sightedness over the previous decade, not preparing, from the Trump administration's ineptitude. But at the end of the day, when COVID hit, we had something like 1% of what we needed in terms of masks and gloves in the stockpile. So we became reliant on these mercenaries who took the federal government and states for a ride, and taxpayers got screwed.
Speaking of mercenaries in the Trump administration, not to let them off, not only should they not be let off the hook, it was grotesque and homicidal, I would argue. His kid-in-law, Jared Kushner, you mentioned, was the recommendation for an $86 million contract that New York State gave for 14 or 1,500 ventilators, not one of which was delivered. Is that not correct?
That's right. It's unclear if Kushner himself was involved, but it was the sort of coterie of well-to-do business associates, his network, that was brought in, civilians who had no business being in the pandemic response.
And by the way, it's not just these contracts. The Paycheck Protection Program, which we knew a little bit more about, again, incredibly well-intended to keep businesses afloat that were hanging by a thread, to keep workers working, that sort of thing. Also rife with billions of dollars of fraud, no?
Right. It's an $800 billion program, many hundreds of thousands of awards given, really with speed at the center focus. And it was just a flawed program in the way Congress designed it, and just really easy to defraud. And people bought yachts and Rolls Royces and mansions.
You're not old enough to remember The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight by the great Jimmy Breslin, but I hope you're not offended. I'm reading your book, and, half the time I'm enraged, and half the time it's like an SNL routine. It's like literally like The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, on the government side and on the side of these grifters, these scammers. How did you treat all this as you're reporting it, David?
Right. As an American, I was outraged at a lot of what I was seeing. But, in the course of reporting, you end up in silly situations where this person I'd been tracking down for months offers me marijuana, for instance. And, I mentioned the soda bottle test tubes. And I felt we've all just been through the ringer here. I'd like to include some of that humor because, it's the texture of who we are as humans in this time. And this was really just absurd behavior and, just emblematic of where we're broken as a country.
You know, I know you're not a moralist, you're a journalist, but what is the moral, or at least the takeaway from this tale you told in your estimation?
Well, one is if we're prepared, maybe we won't have the national well-being in the hands of mercenaries. The other is, you know, it's wrong to come into our time of need and try to get rich by screwing people over. And we saw it on a massive scale. And my hope is that this book is really a blueprint of exactly what we shouldn't do the next time we're faced with such a crisis.
And a blueprint for Congress people who should be engaging in honest oversight to do their jobs. That would be my only addition to your playlist. David, your book is terrific. Everybody should read it. Thanks so much for your time and your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The book again is Pandemic Inc., Chasing the Capitalist and Thieves Who Got Rich While We Got Sick. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. Harvard made a lot of headlines this week for announcing it's putting $100 million towards atoning for its past ties to slavery. But is it enough? Boston Foundation CEO and President Lee Pelton joins me on that and other reparations efforts underway tomorrow at 7. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe.
Hey folks, today we're in Copley Square in downtown Boston. You know, usually I'm the guy who answers your questions, but today you are going to answer my questions about the unwritten rules and quirks of life in Boston.
No respectable Bostonian calls it Beantown.
Some people call us the 617 because 617 is the Boston area code.
Yeah, the bean. Well, that's what I've heard it as, the bean. Boston the bean. Baked beans, I don't know.
Where I see the mailman, he wears shorts, you know? And some other people wear shorts, you know, I guess it's a fad.
I never could get into shorts in the winter, but we do have some Bostonians that can do that.
Shorts is, if you can handle the code, I definitely recommend wearing shorts.
The streets aren't like other cities, like how it's more grid-like. Ours is literally all over the place. You could be on one street for a minute and that street will literally turn into another street and you won't realize it. There's a lot of one-ways, there's a lot of dead ends, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs.
Don't drive your car from place to place. It's not going to work.
Why is that?
And, well, first of all, you can't get parking even if you wanted it where you want it. And secondly, you're going to be forced to spend what you would consider a mortgage for your house to get a parking space.
I have been using the T, but it's super simple for me. It's really easy. It gets me where I'm going pretty fast.
T's frustrating. It's going to take you about an hour to get anywhere on it. It's going to take you a while, so be patient. Relax, bring a book. I felt like this is a pretty accessible city by foot.
There's so many times where I've almost ran people over for jaywalking, and then we do it, so.
I mean, who wants to go from corner to corner? I mean, you know, to cross the street. If I see that it's clear, I jaywalk.
One thing they don't take into consideration, iron don't cry.
Jaywalking is part of our revolutionary spirit. That's how we keep it alive. I'm very good. I'm very good at it. I haven't lost anybody now in 3 weeks.
Well, there you have it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what unwritten rules of Boston you live by, or let me know what you're curious about because, hey, I might just look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there.
The Curiosity Desk is sponsored by Emerson College, inspiring curiosity and creative expression in all of us.